Other than Adolf, is there any name in history that just isn't used because of how bad one person was? Vidkun in Norway. It was the first name of Vidkun Quisling, the Nazi collaborator. Reminds me of a joke I heard somewhere. A Norwegian man walks into a courthouse, asking to change his name. Sure thing, the clerk said. First, please tell me your current name, Vidkun Shitstain, and what would you like to change it to? Olaf Shitstain. Heard a similar one in Norwegian. His last name was Hjortelord, or Deerdung in English, which he thought was fine and he kept. Unfortunately, Adolf is still a popular name in dog breeding for Rottweilers, Doberman, Pinschers, etc. Any owner looking for a distinctly intimidating name. Unreal. I heard another version in my youth when I was growing up in Utah, which is a heavily Republican state. The guy's name was Franklin Delano Stinkfish, and he wanted to change his name to just plain Joe Stinkfish. Here's another name joke. A Native American brave wanted to know where he got his name. He was told the chief named all male children in the tribe, and he should take it up with him. So he respectfully asked the chief why he gave him that particular name. I trust the Great Spirit to inspire me, young one, the kindly chief answered. I look to nature for guidance. If, when I'm presented with a child, the stream is rushing, I will name him Babbling Brook. If I see a deer in the woods, he shall be named Noble Stag. But tell me, two dogs f***ing, why do you ask? Germany has a fairly restrictive name laws for newborns. Names that would humiliate or brand a child as evil are prohibited, at least in theory. Defined examples of such names include Lucifer, Judas, Cain, Pfefferminze, Lit, Peppermint, and Moon Unit. Interestingly enough, Adolf is not strictly prohibited, as long as the parents can provide a sensible reason for their choice. Family tradition. ETA. Just woke up to like 100 replies, so I thought I'd expand a bit. Technically, parents can make up any name for their child, but the registry office may refuse to enter it if it threatens the child's well-being, like opening them up to ridicule. Parents can choose to fight this decision in court, where the result is usually a coin toss, since it's a fairly subjective manner. For example, the name Puma was approved by a court, despite being a popular children's character. The example names I've provided are from the Wikipedia page about first names in Germany. Pfefferminze and Moon Unit, in particular, are names that were rejected by a court, so I thought they were worth mentioning. Other things that are banned include places. This is often ignored. I assume it's more about small-town Amelgatsen than London. Or brand names, with an exception for Fanta, since it's a common West African name. Last name, cultural exceptions apply. Titles, anything that is not recognizable as a first name. No tragedies allowed. Or names that infringe on religious freedom, like Christ. Jesus was originally banned for the same reason, but is now allowed due to popularity in Hispanic spaces. Additionally, up until 2008, a name had to be clearly identifiable as male or female, so gender-neutral names were only allowed in combination with a gendered middle name. Moon Unit? One of Frank Zappa's daughter's name. But IDK, why it was included here because they weren't born in Germany. All his kids were born in the USA. Think about it. If you were on the German board of name banning, and you heard someone just named their kid Moon Unit, you'd jot that down in your notebook. For the next meeting, I'm very interested to know why Peppermint is included on the list. It's on the list because people actually tried naming their daughter Pfefferminze, the German word for peppermint, with the last letter E exchanged to an A to make it more feminine. The examples on the list, that is published regularly, are all names that were denied. As a side note, someone also tried naming their child Ruhestörung, which translates to Disruption of Silence. Disruption of Silence sounds like an absolutely kick-ass metal band. Disruption of Silence is an apt description of children I went to high school with an Osama. Poor kid was born in the mid-90s. I had two friends named Osama growing up. They now go by the names Sam and Sammy. On a similar note, I went to school with a girl named Isis. It was before ISIS was a thing. Always wondered how she's doing now with that poor name. I know someone called Isis, and TBH, I don't think about the connection much. Obviously, when you first hear it, it's strange, but really, it's a beautiful name. It is beautiful, and the name of an Egyptian goddess. She was one of the most widely worshipped deities in the Egyptian Nubian cultures, and the Greeks as well, when they ruled and settled in Egypt. It was believed she helped people enter the afterlife, among other things. This is the association most people made pre-terrorist group, and it's a real shame those assholes' abbreviation is more recognizable when the actual origin of the name is historical, cool, and interesting. Hello, I'm Bob Isis of Bob Isis Toyota. Reminds me of the poor guy that sold his Toyota pickup truck he had used for his business. The truck had both his name and phone number on the side. The dealership he sold the truck to said they'd remove it for him. Next time he sees the truck was in a photo with an ISIS terrorist firing a massive machine gun out of the back. Update, keep being told the car isn't a Toyota. My bad. I promise to never mix up a Toyota for Honda again. I had a student named Usama who was 16 when 911 hit. He got bullied so bad he changed school. One time, I asked if he had considered going by Sam, and he said no, that wasn't his name. Saw a comedian in NYC a few years ago named Usama. His stage name is Usama bin Laden Isis. I know someone who named his daughter Isis after the ancient Egyptian goddess. That year, Isis rose in the Middle East. A friend of mine named his dog Isis after the same goddess, long before ISIS was a thing. His dog also has a tendency to reign, so he's wandering through the dog park yelling, "ISIS!" more than I expect he is comfortable with. Reminds me of how they had to rename the spy agency in Archer, since it was called ISIS for the first few seasons. The first episode with the new name has a scene where you can see workers removing the ISIS sign in the background, not because of a person, but Gaylord used to be a name, and now nobody uses it for the obvious reason. I had a male manager once named Gale, short for Gaylord. It really was an A and not an O. Holy shit, no wonder he goes by Gale. No child of mine will be named Gaylord, at least change a letter. Sure, honey, the English teacher at my prep school was called Gaylord. I don't think teaching 8 13-year-old boys should have been his first choice. Our principal's last name was Gay. Mr. Gay was an unfortunate name for a junior plus high school principal. Edit to add. His first name started with AA Gay. Principal edit. I'm laugh crying at your responses. I can't breathe. Nimrod, I blame Bugs Bunny. That was totally due to Bugs Bunny. In a similar vein, the Muppets have always gotten normal names which immediately become unpopular. Oscar, Kermit, Grover, all fairly normal names until they were applied to the Muppets, then no more. Homer. I have a good friend whose birth name is Homer. He was born in like 1980 before The Simpsons. From the age of 12 on, he started going by his middle name, as Homer was synonymous with The Simpsons. Fun fact, Matt Groening's parents were named Marge and Homer. Judas, or Judah, etc., stopped being used by Christians because of the association with Judas Iscariot in the Bible. It's mostly restricted to Jews. Not historical, but fictional. The nickname Lolita is now associated with a book and a genre of pornography, and has disappeared for that reason. Oddly, there was a good Judah or Judas and a bad one. Everyone associates the bad one with the name Judas. The S ending is from the Greek reading of the name, because the entire Eastern Mediterranean spoke Greek after centuries of Greek rule by the time the books of the New Testament were authored. But even in the New Testament, there's the Book of Jude. The name Jude is differentiated from Judas in English, seemingly to differentiate him from the bad guy who betrayed Jesus. But the name is not differentiated in Greek. The Book of Jude is the Book of Judas in Greek. Both of them were ethnic Jews, and the name in Hebrew for this would be Yehuda. All the Jews named Yehuda, Judah, Judas, Jude were named after the original Yehuda, one of the 12 sons of Jacob, Yaakov, who then became the patriarch of the tribe of Judah, which later led the kingdom of Judah after Israel split into 2 kingdoms due to the civil war after Solomon died. Judah is the term from which we get the term Jew, referring to the people of the kingdom of Judah. In the Spanish-speaking word Lolita is still a not uncommon nickname, as most of the women with that name are named Dolores, while more like the character has the very real name of Dolores and gets the usual nickname. Though traditionally, most Dolores weren't just named Dolores, they were Maria Dolores, or Maria de los Dolores. But as preference for shortening names got stronger, the Maria was dropped as most people already assume that by giving the girls the name Dolores, you were referring to that aspect of the Virgin Mary. There is a number of Dolores on Mexican mainstream who goes by Lolita, a newscaster and a singer and musical theater artist. Judas is not really and very used named, though the other Judas, which is Saint Judas Tadeo, is probably the most popular saint of the country by sheer numbers, piggybacking off of this for fictional characters ruining names. Until 1989, Ursula was a perfectly normal name. Then The Little Mermaid happened. Edit. I'm specifically referring to use in Anglophone countries. I know it's still in common use in Eastern Europe. I think I went to middle school with the last Ursula. Back in the 90s, I remember thinking that the one girl named Ursula in my grade school was going to be really mean. Then it turned out she was really sweet. I wonder what happened to her. 90s also probably grew up to be a wacky, struggling musician, working in an NYC coffee shop. I would think Alexa is a rather burdensome name nowadays. A Siri in my son's class. The only issue she seemed to have was that the kids would all say, "Hey Siri" to her after class started, just to make other kids' phones respond when they were supposed to be turned off. My daughter is named Suri after her great-grandmother. The amount of people who say, "Oh Siri," like the iPhone thing, when she introduces herself is too damn high. Haven't seen a Barney since the big purple dinosaur hit the airwaves. Barneys never got good representation in media. They got Gumball, Rubble, Stinson, and the dinosaur. Edit. I'll be honest, guys. I don't know any of these other Barney. Damn, there are a lot of them. Katrina took a hit in popularity after the hurricane. I always wondered how Katrina and the waves felt about this. Karen. My mom is called Karen, and is the nicest lady ever. She asked me to explain all the hate, and I felt so bad for her. Maybe it's specific to a region, but in Quebec, Canada, you'll never see the name Aurora used. That is not because there was a bad person named Aurora, but because of a terrible scandal that happened in the early 20th century in rural Quebec, where a young girl named Aurore was tortured by her father and stepmother. Her tragic story became wildly known and got even more famous following a movie about her, literally named Aurore, the Martyr Child. Since then, that story has become somewhat integrated in the Quebec folklore, and no one would ever name their child Aurore because of its tragic connotation. I always have this conversation with my buddy, Genghis Dahmer. We go in circles. Jolene. Dolly ended that shit. Also, Roxanne. I once met someone who introduced herself as Roxanne. And please don't sing it, Lucifer. It translates to Morning Star, Bringer of Light, so it would have been a great name if it weren't also the name of the devil. The devil has some rad, not evil-sounding monikers. Son of the Morning sounds pretty cool, and even a force for good, but it is not so apparently the only name I can think of in the UK that absolutely wouldn't be used now is Myra. Myra Hindley was a sadistic killer of children in the 1960s. Apparently, a lot of people named their daughters Daenerys after the Game of Thrones character. That didn't end well. I once taught a kid named Daenerys. I have to wonder what her parents thought of Season 8. You don't find many people named Lance these days, but in medieval times, people were named Lance a lot. Tss.